This lesson simulates a market for thingamajigs, before and after a natural disaster like a hurricane, and with and without government-imposed price controls. Students, acting as buyers and sellers, will experience the ability of markets to adjust to the increased scarcity caused by the disaster, and how price controls confound those adjustments, resulting in shortages. Setup for this activity requires a lot of copying and cutting, but the good news is if you prepare the game pieces on cardstock or even laminate them, you'll be able to use them over and over again.
We're going to participate in another market simulation today called the Market for Thingamajigs.
For this simulation, 6 students will play the role of seller, while the rest of the students are buyers. You'll need 2 sets of buyer cards, low-value cards and high-value cards. If possible, prepare each set on a different color paper, or mark the high-value cards with an H on the back so you can distinguish between the 2 sets. Copy 1 buyer transaction record for each student playing the role of buyer. You'll need 70 regular thingamajig cards, and then 20 more on different colored paper. Each seller will need their own seller roll card, a how to get more card, and a seller transaction record.
And it has room for you to write.
Additionally, you'll need a transparency of the tally sheet to keep a record of these transactions. This can also be done easily on a whiteboard or a smartboard. And of course, you'll need some candy or something of value that the students can purchase at the end of the activity with their profits. Before you begin, have the 6 stores set up around the room, with all the materials in place for each seller. It helps to spread the sellers out as much as possible so the activity isn't concentrated in one part of the room.
So sellers, raise your hand if you're a seller. You have a green roll card. We have Rebecca.
It also helps to prevent collusion among the sellers. Choose your sellers and have them report to the stores and make themselves familiar with their materials and the seller transaction records. Pass out the How to Play the Market for Thingamajigs handout to the remaining students and ask them to read the instructions silently. Use this time to pass out a buyer transaction record and a low-value buyer card to each of the remaining students. Remind students that they can buy as many thingamajigs in a round as possible, but they can only buy 1 with each card. So once they've made a purchase, they should give their buyer card and the thingamajig they purchased to you in exchange for another card. This helps prevent students from reselling thingamajigs.
The market we're participating in is called the Market for Thingamajigs, and so, you know, a thingamajig could be many things, but a thingamajig has a value to you. So this card tells you how much you value a thingamajig at, and if you can get it for that price or anything less, then it's worth it to you to buy that thingamajig at that price. So this buyer card is good for 1 transaction. And once you have bought a thingamajig with this card, you have to trade the card in and get a new card to do a new transaction. Okay? These are what your thingamajigs look like once you purchase one of them. Okay, you're going to negotiate a price, buyers, just like with the seller, and you're going to record the purchase price on your transaction record. The difference between what you value it at and the purchase price is, we're going to call it profit here for buyers, but we know that that's that extra value that you're getting that you're not having to pay for. Okay, so and we're going to call that profit in this activity. So which of these do you want to be higher? The value or the purchase price? The value. So buyers, put a star above the value column. You want that to be higher each time. Okay, sellers, what kind of prices do sellers like? High prices. And sellers, you have a card that a seller roll card, and it tells you you have an inventory of these thingamajigs, and it tells you what your cost is. So if your cost of making a thingamajig was $100, would you want to sell it for $50? You need to make sure that you can at least cover your cost of making the thingamajig. Otherwise, it's not worth it to sell it. And if you do sell it at something below your cost, then you're taking a loss on that thingamajig. So sellers, anytime that you, on your sheet, you're going to have your cost, and it's the same every time. Sellers do not have to get a new card. They keep this card for all of their rounds. And I notice most of you have it turned down at your seat, and that's probably, you know, a good idea. So sellers, your costs will be the same every round. You can write that down now. You can write it down later when you're calculating your profits. But the difference between the cost and the sales price for you is your profit. Okay? Which do you want to be higher, sellers? The cost or the sales price? sales price. So sellers put a star above the sales price. You want that to be higher each time, and if it is, you make a profit. Okay, is there any questions before we start? Any questions?
Answer any questions, but don't spend too much time pre-teaching. Assure the students that if they jump in, they'll figure it out as they go. The game begins when you say go, and it won't take long for the room to get pretty loud as the purchasing of Thingamajigs begins.
Okay, the market's open. Buyers, I have your new cards up here. We have 1 minute.
Keep an eye on the sellers nearest you and watch their inventories as a signal of when to stop the round. Be sure to stop the round before the sellers sell out.
Time. Return all cards and Thingamajig cards up here.
Collect all the buyer cards and restock the seller's inventory of Thingamajigs to the 10 that they started with.
I want you to take this time to update your transaction records and calculate your profit for round 1. Everybody draw a line under the last transaction that you made, and this is round 1.
Poll the sellers asking how many Thingamajigs they sold and record the amount on the tally sheet for everyone to see.
5, 4, that's a total of 30 Thingamajigs in round 1. So this time we're going to hand out new buyer cards for you.
If students are still getting the hang of things, you may want to run one more round, just like the first. If they're comfortable with the activity, then start round 2 by handing out higher value buyer cards instead of the low value cards you started with. Announce that there has been a disaster, and Thingamajigs are something everyone needs after a disaster.
And so whatever Thingamajigs are, let's say that Thingamajigs in this case might be generators. You can see...
Play round 2, and this time sellers will run out of Thingamajigs pretty quickly.
Good. Okay, the market is open.
45?
45? I'll give you 45. 46.
47.
I'll do
47.
I'll do 47 too.
50.
I'll give you 40.
You're lucky, Ryan. Sold out.
Are you still selling it? They're all sold out.
15 seconds.
Oh, someone
$60. I'm just kidding.
10 seconds.
There's no more.
No more Thingamajigs.
Oh, no, what? What, Ryan, you don't have any more Thingamajigs?
Let the round run past the time when sellers sell out so students can actually see the shortage around them. Then call time and collect all the buyer cards and replenish the seller's inventories once again. Ask the students how that round was different.
What was different in round 2 compared to round 1?
Poll the sellers again as to how many they sold and record this on the transaction sheet.
Okay, and seller number
All of
2,
them
you
should have sold out this
Seller
time.
number 3, seller number 4, we sold out and 40 Thingamajigs were sold in this round. What was the average price that you saw for Thingamajigs in the first round? 45-ish? Okay, what about in round 2? 70.
While some buyers may feel victimized by the higher prices, it's hard to justify that with the gains on their profit sheets. Point out that they wouldn't have paid the higher prices if it wasn't worth it to them. Get them to speculate as to why the price was higher and why the stores sold out so quickly, and then use that as a segue into the discussion of how sellers will now have the opportunity to obtain more Thingamajigs during a round if they'd like to.
Would you have sold more if you had had the opportunity to sell more, to get more inventory? Well, we're going to give you the opportunity to get more inventory, and so sellers, you're getting a new roll card.
Give each seller a how to get more card on which you've filled out what they have to do to get more. In our simulation, we had the kids run outside the classroom and around a couple trees, and as they came back in the room, they could get more Thingamajigs. Just make sure that whatever you choose is easy enough and can be done quickly enough that some sellers will be able to obtain more during the round. Also point out to the sellers that these Thingamajigs from out of town have a higher monetary cost to the sellers as well. Hand out the new high-value buyer cards to each buyer and conduct round 3 the same way, but this time you'll want to have a helper stationed somewhere to distribute the new Thingamajigs. that are represented by a different color paper.
And then when you come through the door, you get how many more Thingamajigs? 5, which you can then sell, and you are absolutely welcome to do that more than once if you would like to do that more than once during the round, okay? Any questions? Okay, the market is open.
60? 61.
60. What do you want? Scotch one. I got it. Run, Ryan. Be back.
3 minutes, we have 3 minutes.
I gave you 60. 70. 70. I thought you 60. 70. 70. I thought you 60.
Watch the time and don't let this round run any longer than the last ones. Call time and poll the sellers again. The result should be that even more Thingamajigs were sold than the round before, and at higher post-disaster prices as well. While the buyers will likely have been complaining about high prices since the disaster, entertain those complaints at this time. Ask the sellers why they were charging more when they know everyone needs Thingamajigs after disaster. Let the students know that you've heard their complaints and that you agree something should be done about it. Announce that to be fair and help these poor consumers, the price of Thingamajigs is capped at its pre-disaster price.
It's only fair that we help these buyers out. After all, it is a time of disaster. People are in need, and sellers, you know, let's help these buyers out. What were the prices, what were Thingamajigs going for before the disaster? 45 is what you were telling me before. So I think it's only fair that we say that they should go for 45 after the pending disaster as well. So in this round, Thingamajigs can only be sold for $45 or less. Sellers, you still have the option to get additional Thingamajigs. You know that they come with a higher cost, which is running around the trees and coming back in to get 5 additional, and you know what that additional cost is. What is the limit on price? $45. Okay? Buyers, is that better? $45? Okay. The market is open.
Conduct the last round just as before. While sellers will likely sell out quickly, it's unlikely that you'll have any sellers take the extra measures to get more because it costs them more to get those extra Thingamajigs.
45. 45. Ryan, 45. 45.
They're all out now. I think they want to go again.
What's happening? Seller number 1, any more? Seller number 2.
Starting
Seller number 3. Seller number 4.
Oh, I know what
I
happened.
guess this round is over, buyers. I'm sorry. I guess this round is over.
Call an end to the round and draw attention to the buyers who are upset because they weren't able to get Thingamajigs that round, even though you were trying to help them out by instituting a price
Hey,
ceiling.
Martin, you said that's not fair. What do you mean it's not fair?
In the debriefing of this activity, have the students identify the costs and benefits of the price ceiling and ask them to speculate as to the impact anti-price gouging laws would have on the length of time it would take for recovery and cleanup in disaster areas.
Markets, trade, moves goods and services to the people that value them most. And in this activity, in this round right here, trade, right, moved the Thingamajigs from that town over there to this town because you valued them more. Prices are signals. Prices are signals about how much you value something. And when you say, I'm willing to pay a high price, you're saying, I value it more than the people in that town over there. And that signal draws the resources to the people who value them most. I took away your ability to signal, right, in round 4. You didn't have that ability to signal with a higher price that you value the resources more, and so did the resources come? No.
Understanding how markets work and the role of prices within markets is an important key to being able to explain and predict economic behavior. Prices in open markets adjust to address the changing conditions of scarcity, and markets move goods and services to those that value them most. In this activity, higher prices drew the Thingamajigs from out of town, where they were valued less, to the disaster area where people valued them more. But then a price control distorted the price signal, preventing the movement of Thingamajigs to those that valued them most. Price controls prevent the important transmission of information that allows consumers and producers to adjust their choices amidst the changing conditions of scarcity.